You're listening to Meet the Thriller Author, the podcast where I interview writers from mysteries, thrillers, and suspense books. I am your host, Alan Peterson, and this is episode number 90. In this episode of the podcast, we'll be meeting Matt Coyle, who is the author of the best-selling Rick Cahill crime novels. Although he wanted to be a crime writer when he was 14 after reading Raymond Chandler, his foray into crime fiction took about 30 years in the making. He spent that time managing a restaurant and in sales while writing at night. His debut novel, Yesterday's Echo, was published in 2013 and won the Anthony Award for Best First Novel, the San Diego Book Award for Best Mystery, and the Ben Franklin Award for Best New Voice in Fiction. Matt's second book, Night Tremors, was a BookReporter.com reviewer's favorite book of 2015 and was an Anthony, Seamus, and Lefty Award finalist. His latest novel, Lost Tomorrows, is the sixth book in the Rick Cahill series and was published in December of 2019. Before we get to meet Matt Coyle, I wanted to let you know about a special promotion from Audible. Audible is running a President's Day event where you can save 46% by getting 4 months of an Audible membership for just $7.95 per month. The offer ends on February 18th, 2020, so check it out at thrillingreads.com/audible46. This is a great way to get an awesome deal and to help support the podcast by heading on over to thrillingreads.com/audible46. Coming up is my interview with Matt Coyle. How are you doing, Matt?
Good, Alan. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thanks so much for being on the podcast. I appreciate it. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about your background?
Oh, I didn't know I'd be talking about boring stuff up front. Well, I spent, how many years? I spent 10 years in the restaurant business, and then 10 years in the golf business, and then 16 years in the sports licensing business. About the last 10 of which I was writing novels as I was working full time in the sports licensing business. It took me 10 years to get published, I'd say, from floppy disk until that's how long ago it started, till publication.
So did you always wanted to be an author since like you were younger?
I did. It took me, unfortunately, about 30 years to figure out you had to write to become a published author. So that was the hard part. Yeah, I always wanted. I read true crime. I read crime as a kid. Raymond Chandler, Ross McDonald, going way back. Lawrence Sanders. I actually started with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Agatha Christie before I got into the harder stuff. So I always knew that I wanted to write, and I knew I wanted to write crime. But and I even got a degree in English in college. But like I said, you have to sit your butt in the chair and write to get something done. It took me a while to figure that out.
What was the first, what drove you to sit down and give it a shot finally?
Guilt. I had that degree. What are you going to do with a degree in English? Maybe teach, maybe go and get a law degree. And so I got a job in a restaurant out of college with my 4-year degree in English. But I told people that, I was going to be a writer. That was the thing. So, just wait. I'm going to be a writer. All the while I'm writing very little. And so this went on for years, decades. And I'd worked for 4 golf companies in 10 years, and I'd seen them either all go out of business or change with new ownership into a whole different kind of entity. So I was working for this company called Carbide, and I saw that the writing on the wall was about to go under. And I said, I was 43 at the time. I said, this is it. When this thing goes down, you got to write a book or stop talking about it and go and get a real career instead of just going from job to job. And sure enough, the company went out of business, and I had a little money saved up. And in, I think about 5.5 months, I wrote what I thought was a book, but was really a first draft of what would years later become my first novel, Yesterday's Echo. So that was guilt. I drew a line in the sand. You have to do it, or you can't talk about it anymore. You got to go do something else.
And so the first one that you attempted to write was the Rick Cahill series.
Yeah, it ended up becoming a actual book, but it took, like I said, 10, 11 years for it to be good enough to be published.
And so can you tell us about the Rick Cahill?
Sure. Rick, this is the book that just came out, Lost Tomorrows, is book number 6 in the series. But he is a disgraced ex-cop who now, as this book comes out, is 14 years after the fact of his wife being murdered when he was a cop up in Santa Barbara. I live in San Diego. And he was arrested for her murder, but never tried. He was released, but never exonerated until all the way up into this book. He's still, there's 6 books. He's still a main person of interest in her death. So he's had that dark cloud hanging over his head after he got booted, and even though he wasn't tried he was released, never tried as a cop. He did end up losing his job. They got rid of him up in Santa Barbara. So he came back to his hometown of San Diego, where he worked in a restaurant that he worked in as a kid for a year. And then that's the first book, Yesterday's Echo. And then he became a private investigator to get kind of back to his somewhat law and order roots. And that's where he's been now about 5.5 years or 6 years as Lost Tomorrows opens up. So this guy's got a dark cloud over his head.
Yeah, so the whole series, yeah, because I read a little bit about the Lost Tomorrows. I haven't finished it yet, but I see that's kind of he's got some issues.
Definitely has issues, yeah. He's a complicated, dark guy.
And are you continuing to write on this series? Do you expect more books out?
Well, I just turned in book 7. I'm not going to say what it's about because I want people to read yesterday's or read Lost Tomorrows and find out what might come next. But with Lost Tomorrows, the whole impetus for this guy's character has been the death of his wife, which happened in the backstory to the first book, Yesterday's Echo. It never even was on the page. It was always a backstory. But it's been the impetus for him, for his drive as a private investigator to try to get to the truth, to try to redeem himself. Whether he killed his wife or not, he feels responsible for his murder. So every case he takes, or every one I write about, he has some more than just a professional interest in finding the truth. He's got an emotional tug to help him find the truth in all of his cases. So when he goes back to Santa Barbara in Lost Tomorrows, under the auspices of paying his respects to his former training officer and partner on the Santa Barbara police force, who was killed in a hit-and-run car accident, he ends up investigating that situation at the auspices of his former partner's sister. And along those lines, he ends up investigating the truth about what happened to his wife.
So what's your writing process like then? Do you plan these out before you sit down to write them, or do you outline? Or?
The writing process is very messed up. I don't outline. I tried to outline, I think, in one of the revisions of Yesterday's Echo. For me, it just kind of stunts me. I mean, I really gave it a hard try. I have a kind of a skeletal thing where I have an inciting incident, and I know where the end is. Pretty much, somebody's going to die. Somebody has to solve the crime. There's a lot of stuff that happens in between. So I'd see the finish line. I mean, I don't know exactly. It may be a little foggy, but I know A, and I know where Z is, and I just have to connect the dots going along. And I really let the characters kind of guide me there. I try to put Rick under as much pressure as possible. Try to force him to do things he doesn't want to do, and under the I'll say auspices again of solving a crime. So constantly putting him under pressure, so the plot kind of comes from the decisions he's forced to make. If that makes any sense. Obviously, there's crime involved, there's influences involved, but so from that, there's kind of a skeleton, and then things fill in for me. It's kind of a mess, but it seems to be working.
Yes, you just got 7 books down, so it seems to be working all right.
Yeah.
And so the stories, I know this is the cliche question for asking authors in interviews, but where do you get your ideas?
Everybody I've been on a lot of panels where the panelists are talking beforehand and hoping that no one asks that question. I think it's a fine question. Yeah. I think it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I am curious about it. I mean, where do people get their ideas?
Yeah, I think it's the really important question. For the first book, I'd had this idea in my head for so long about writing about a character. I didn't know who he was exactly. That some character with some dark past. He probably was going to be an ex-cop. Not that I ever was, but there's some law enforcement in my extended family. And as I started to write the book, I realized it was getting dark. It was going to get darker and darker the more I got away from my own life experiences. So that one has just sort of been around for a while. That the idea of this character, some darkness, and as I started to write the book, the darkness filled in. But for the second book, I actually had the idea came from like 48 Hours or Dateline or put together. There was a story about, this was Night Tremors, my second book. There was a story they were doing for years about this kid. I think he was about 17 when he was arrested for his parents' murder. I think it was in Pennsylvania or somewhere in the Northeast. And there, of course, there's always a point of view on 48 Hours or Dateline. And the point of view was this guy was innocent. And you're watching the shows, and they would update it every year. Every year you go back to, this guy is still in prison, still hasn't gotten out. And that from that idea came a story that was a lot different than in real life. But in real life, after watching this poor guy's progress for 5 or 6 years, he eventually did get out. But so that was really the only book that came from something very specific in real life. The other ones are, like I said, I try to put Rick in a situation where he has to battle his own internal darkness. And so somewhere from there, I find an inciting incident. There may be something in the newspaper, like in Blood Truth, there was a little bit about real estate in San Diego and kind of some darkness and machinations in that, which is sort of a subplot. But most of the stories really come internally as how can I put this guy under pressure? If that answers your question at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As his story progresses, things make sense. The obstacles that are put in front of him make sense as his journey goes along. So even though it seems kind of, wooey, it kind of things sort of fall in place. Like for him to going to Santa Barbara and I knew when I was writing the first book, when I realized I was writing a series, that he was eventually going to have to solve the crime of what happened to his wife. This thing had to be answered to be fair to my readers. And so that book 6, Lost Tomorrows. Yeah, I knew at some point I was going to have to write this book. So that definitely was something, things fall into place that way as the guy's journey progresses.
Yeah, so like every book is a standalone, but there's the overarching the arc is the wife's murder in the background.
Yeah, I would say there's always. I'm always happy when a reviewer says you can read as a standalone, because I don't write them episodically like you watch on Law and Order, where everything's cleared up. The crime's the thing. It's more his journey through life is the thing for me, and there is baggage that carries over, but it's a very delicate dance that I try to go through with each book. That for me, that's the hardest thing, is how much do I tell for new readers, and how much do I go forward with this story without spoiling it for new readers and boring old readers. So that is always one of my main concerns. But yes, each story in itself is a single story, single problem with a lot of subplots. But and this one, Lost Tomorrows, is actually more standalone than any of the books I'd written, which is kind of funny because I didn't intend to write it that way. But it is, new readers get a little bit of the backstory. Old readers learn some new things about Coyle and Rick's relationship. The only thing that new readers might find interesting is Rick's the darkness of him. And they hadn't been along for the journey the whole way. That can be shocking to some, but actually I've been very happy with reviewers who hadn't read me before saying it worked for them. So.
And how long do you plan to write these the Rick Cahill novels? I know you just had it in your 7. Are you going to continue on with the series?
I can't say. I can't. I don't want to be a jerk about it, but
no, not at all.
I'm going to leave that open. I just turned in the 7th book and that I've written, and I have to start writing an 8th book for my publisher as I'm under contract. But
so we shall see.
Yeah.
So you got 7 books under your belt. As you're getting writing these more books, does your process become? Is it the same? Is it easier? Does it get harder?
It's awful. You would think that I could, I just turned in 7, so I've done this thing 7 times. You would think it'd be easier, but it actually, or at least more structured. And for me, it's less structured, which is bizarre. You call it when you're messy like I am, you call it organic. It's more organic, which sounds much better. No, I don't. It's a lot hazier. It's a lot fuzzier. And even, especially the book I just turned in was very difficult to write for a number of reasons. But yeah, I get in the middle. I get kind of, I'm thinking, I don't know how to do this anymore. I'm a fraud. I don't know why anybody ever read me before, because I clearly don't know how to write. And then I say, well, you've done this before. Just keep going through. How bad can it be? Because when I'm writing a book, I think they're all pretty bad. And then at the end, I read them, the first draft through, and I go, it's not that bad. And then revise, and it gets to be, I think it's pretty good. And by the time the book comes out, I'm thinking, this is the damn best book I've ever written. But my process, I'll tell you a little bit, something, my subconscious is really an important force in my writing, which sounds kind of stupid, but I believe in it. And I'm not the kind of a woo-woo kind of guy. Things kind of fill in, like in Yesterday's Echo, my first book. I was going along. I didn't know what I was doing. I was writing a book, and it was very autobiographical, which was pretty boring. Nobody really wanted to read about my life. And then a phrase came out of the ether to me, which was, the first time I saw her, she made me remember and she made me forget. So I realized with that phrase that there was a lot more darkness and pain in this guy's life than I'd been writing. And that sort of set me along the path I need to go, further away from my own life story. And as I'll be writing now, I call it dropping anchor. Something will come to me from my subconscious in a scene, and I'll put it in there, and it may not make sense, or Rick's reaction to it may not make sense right away. And I don't worry about it. I just keep going forward, and then it may, by the end of the writing session, I may come to understand it, and maybe a couple of weeks down the line. And usually these anchors give the meaning more, give the book more meaning than I understood. It kind of brings things together for me. But there are times when they don't make sense, and I have to pull them up. I call it pulling anchors, pulling up anchors. But generally, I would say 90% of the time, these things that come out of the ether, my subconscious, do make the book better. So I learn to trust them. Like I said, it's not 100%.
And when you're writing the book, do you set the word count goals or chapter goals, or to keep you going forward?
I do set word count goals. Of course, as you're writing a book, you think, you got a lot of time. You don't hit your word count for the first, maybe once every week you'll hit that day's word count. Because I'll start with maybe 1,000 words. That's my goal. And like I said, when I'm beginning the book, maybe once a week I'll hit that, and I'll think, I got plenty of time. Then all of a sudden you're, 4 months out from the deadline, you realize you got to finish this first draft so you can revise. And then the word counts can go up to a couple thousand, and they're much more adhered to. So I do have specific counts. I mean, it's not a hobby; it's a job, and but invariably, they get bigger as I go.
like cramming for an exam in college. Huh?
Exactly. And I tell myself every time, I'm going to be much better about it this time, but it's sort of the way the process works. And for one thing, I realize that I'm not sitting there not doing anything. I am sitting at a keyboard, and I am, tapping out a few words. But I realize that through all this time comes a better understanding for the book for me. So the time is well used somehow in my brain, but it's always a crunch to get it done in time at the end.
Do you do a lot of research beforehand?
I'm not this is another rarity, is I'm not a big fan of research. I know a lot of mystery authors are. I do what I need to do. I do more than I need to do, of course, because you need to find those one or two nuggets that give your work some veracity that shows you what you're writing about. A little bit about it. But I try not to get too lost in it, and I certainly don't want to be a data dump on it. But I have certain people I go to for certain things. There's a buddy of mine, David Putnam, who's also an author. He's a former sheriff's deputy. I get a lot of law enforcement stuff from him. I'll go. I have lawyer friends. You can look up you can search and find people. People are always really happy to help, which is funny because you can't give them anything. I remember I was a Navy SEAL for my third book, Dark Fishers. I needed to talk to a SEAL about SEAL life and and I'd seen this guy on television. He was selling a product, and it took me a long time to pin him down for him to actually talk to me. And after he gave me some really good information, the exact little nuggets I need to show that these guys are real SEALs. At the end, like I always say, hey, I can't give you anything, but I would love to put your name in my acknowledgments, and if you like, I'd even mention your business so the 14 people that read the book, maybe they'll have some interest. And he goes, no, you can't use my name. Don't do that. No, I don't want my name. And the only other person, there was two other people. One was a banker, and it wasn't. I was just getting safe deposit information from her and how certain things could work. If one was not lost, but that someone had died, no one had claimed it for years. So she gave me some great stuff. And then at the end, I said, well, once again, I gave her the spiel. And she goes, no, don't use my name. I'm wondering, it wasn't anything dark at all. And the other one was just the one I just wrote, was a cop in Santa Barbara. He just said, no, don't worry about it. But everybody else was very helpful. People are always really, and these people were helpful as well. They just didn't want acknowledgement. But it's funny, and I don't know if you found it as well, is that people just really are eager to help. It's really great when you go out there and look. But I try not to get lost in it.
Yeah. So what's your favorite part of being a writer of writing these books?
I like writing the end even though there's never a the end. I like writing the end at the end of the first draft. I would say having days where you sit down and like I said, I don't really outline, and so days where you sit down and I have nothing for an hour and a half, but I'm going through the process of you're a fake, you're a fraud, you know what you're doing. And then something starts to bubble up, and you end up days like that. Sometimes, not always, I can have the most productive days that I ever have. I'll do 1,000 words in an hour and a half, because if you just stay the course. I think staying the course is really important for anybody out there who's thinking about writing, because it's hard. It's not easy. A couple of days may be easy. Oh, I got a great idea for a book, and then okay, now you got 300 pages of to figure out what else happens. So I would say the hard days are probably the most rewarding. It's the funny thing is, as I'm going out in the second half of my tour, starting tomorrow, I'll go into Vroman's in Pasadena, and then up to Chaucer's in Santa Barbara. Is that I really enjoy the signings and the events, and I'm sometimes socially, I won't say shy, but a loner. Let's go with loner. But I did know when I started this career that I would have to get out in front of the public. Public speaking is still a difficult thing to do. It's one of the most feared things of everybody, I think, and I still get nervous before I do it. But I found out that I really enjoy it. I definitely enjoy the Q&A with readers. That's my favorite part. But I do enjoy getting in front of audiences and talking about books and stuff. I'm not going to say it's my favorite thing, but that's probably the thing that surprised me the most that I do enjoy.
Yeah, I was listening on your website. That's you're hitting a lot of spots. So how long are you on the road for?
Well, I did. When you have a December book, I don't know if you've ever had a December book, but it's not a great. It's a good time for sales generally, Christmas gifts and all that. But it's not a great time for touring, because the bookstores really, after the first week, they don't want anything to do with you. So my last 3 books, I think, have come out in December. So I'll do a pre-launch at Mysterious Galaxy in San Diego when books are available, like in mid to late November, and then I'll do Warwick's in La Jolla the first week, and I'll do Book Carnival up in Orange County, and then I'll do Poison Pen in Scottsdale, and that'll be just about it. Maybe some things I'll fill in for December, and then I wait, and then I go on my second tour starting now this week in January, and I'll hit, like I said, the other 2 stores. I'm going to hit Murder by the Book in Houston and Book People in Austin, and then some library things fill in. I'm going to do Book Catapult in San Diego. So it's kind of it's a 2-tour thing, but I'm always trying to add new places, and I haven't been. Chaucer's will be a new one for me because this book takes place in Santa Barbara, but I'm always looking to go to different places. But then it's self-funded tour, so I have to be smart about things. And
so now you mentioned that you were a fan of writing, of reading crime fiction before you even started writing it. Do you still find time to read, or are you too busy now with the?
Well, I do. I do. I actually have a podcast too called Crime Corner, or I only do it. I do it live. I only do it a couple times a month. It's on the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. So I'm reading people's books a lot because I generally have mystery authors on. Although I've had some true crime on, and I want to get into a little bit of like true crime on TV when I get the chance. But so I am reading for that. I just love the genre. I always read the genre. But I'm also going to be a judge in an upcoming award. So I'm going to be. I said yes. So I'm going to be reading. It's not going to be a huge intake like some of the other ones I've done, but I'm going to be reading for that. But yeah, I love the genre. I love to read. I wish I had more time to read. I'm reading a great book by Meg Gardner right now.
Yeah, I noticed she gave you you had some great reviews from some awesome authors like Meg Gardner, and I saw Michael Connelly. That's been pretty awesome.
Yeah, I've been really lucky. Robert Crazy, Jefferson Parker, C.J. Box, among others. Just so elated to have anybody aboard me. I went with Meg. Grew up in Santa Barbara, and I went to UCSB, and she went there and taught there, I think, for a time. So I thought it'd be cool to have her, and she was very gracious about it. They're all very gracious about it. It's a hard, I'm with a mid-tier publisher, so they do a really good job. Ocean View, they do a really good job of pre-pub marketing and things like that. But there's a lot of things I have to do on my own, obviously. Mm-hmm. So I've been going to book signings for over 20 years. I've been, you talk to the authors a little bit. And so through there comes some sort of relationships. I've been going to writers' conferences and, some sort of relationships with people. Because I always try to ask somebody that I know at least a little bit. So it is, I understand, I blurb books too. I understand the drain of time it is, and it is a commitment. And authors of much higher levels than me have much less time than I do to do this stuff. So I'm always so grateful. It's always so cool, but it's a tough thing. You try to preface your email to them as aware of their lack of time as possible. Michael Connelly, I asked him, he's got Bosch, he's writing 2 books a year. And he said to me, he goes, I'll do what I can. So I can't promise anything. So I thought, great. I understand completely. Don't worry about it. So the weekend before my it was due for me to turn it in, he emails me and says, I'm about to get on a plane. I left the ARC at home. Can you send me a PDF? And so I did. Sure enough, Monday he got me a great blurb. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, he's one of my favorite authors. So yeah, I can imagine how exciting that must have been.
Yeah, he's one of mine and everybody's favorite authors. And he's a very nice guy. I don't really know him that well, but he's very generous with his limited time. And I found that through, I don't know if you have, but I found that through the entire genre is that how much other mystery authors, and I'll just say mystery as an overall, encompassing thrillers, everything. I call it crime writing, but how everybody in the genre is willing to help everybody else. It's really an amazing thing. I'd heard about it before I became involved in it. But it is really true that mystery authors are some of the nicest people when it comes to helping other authors. And if you think about it, we're all really competing for shelf space. I mean, we're all our competitors, even though we all admire everybody else. So it's really an amazing thing, and I'm really happy to be a part and do what I can to try to, pass the torch.
Yeah, that is. I have noticed that too. It's amazing how everyone's so kind and helpful with their time, and especially since we're basically competitors, but
right,
helpful community. It's pretty cool. All right, Matt. Before I let you go, we have for our listeners who are aspiring writers. Any advice for them?
Yeah, I think I already said it. Is that you just have to, you really have to do it. I mean, I went to classes at the University of San Diego, University of California, San Diego extension classes at night, and took classes there. I mean, I learned the craft a little bit, but it really just comes down to putting your ass in the seat. You really have to do the work. You have to do it when it's easy. You have to do it when it's hard, and it takes a long time to get good at it. It's not as hard as golf, but it takes a long time to get good at it. And you just have to, I mean, when you're writing it, the first draft, you think, well, I'm a genius. This is probably the best thing that's ever been written. And then you'll come to learn that it's not. In fact, it's not very good, but you have to, each time you get better. Each time you touch, I think, your manuscript, it gets better. And it's the hours. There's no easy way of getting around it. It's putting the hours in and find the joy in it. And if you were meant to do it, put the time in. But it's a hard slog. It takes time and effort.
Right on the money. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it, right?
Right. And it's very, very financially rewarding. You make so much money. It's unbelievable.
Oh, yes. That's the best part.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if you want to get rich quick, this is the business.
It is. There's no better way.
Yeah. And so the best place for listeners to find you is your website at mattcoylebooks.com.
That's right. And I'm on Facebook. It's Matt Coyle. And I got an author page, Matt Coyle Author. If you look at me on Facebook, you'll see a lot of pictures of my dog Angus on the couch. Okay. I'm on Instagram, mcoyle044, I think. I don't do much there, but I'm on Twitter. I can forward things, retweet things. That's about it.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to the Meet the Thriller Author podcast. Be sure to visit thrillerauthors.com to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover great thrilling reads. If you enjoy the podcast, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review to it, wherever it is that you're listening to this podcast, be it iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, wherever it is that you're listening to this right now. I would appreciate it. And please do check out my own thriller novels over at my website at alanpeterson.com. Until next time.